The road trip began on Sunday, July 25th, 2010. Before we even left the garage, we had our first calamity. I set the alarm, closed the door to the garage, and the doorknob came off in my hand. So I went back into the kitchen and started playing with the doorknob and managed to get my key stuck firmly in the lock. Several attempts later, the doorknob was securely back on the doohickey where it belonged. Voila! We were off to Syracuse, our first stop. The Erie Canal Museum and Visitor Center is an excellent little museum, especially for the kids. It has the only remaining whale house in the world. In Alexandria Bay, we took the Uncle Sam's boat tour of the Thousand Island area and Boldt Castle and Boathouse. It was a perfect day. Sunny, in the 80s, medium crowds, and perfect timing. All day we arrived to no lines. The Boldt Castle was built for Louise Boldt by her husband. The castle was large and was built on an island that was reshaped into a heart. There are heart-themed decorative touches all over the place. It was magnificent, but Louise Boldt died an early death before it was finished, and the place was abandoned by her distraught husband. We went up the Sky Tower, which gives you the bird's eye view of the area. Amazing to see this many islands and know that they can be privately owned. If you love to have a boat and to travel, this would be a great place to have a home. Except for one thing. In the winter, the average snowfall is 246 inches. No thanks. Uxbridge, Ontario was a fun side trip. They have a Friends meeting house and cemetery, Uxbridge Auto, Uxbridge Baptist Church, and the train station. It was funny to see the same names somewhere else. This town is 100 years younger than our Uxbridge, and it looks it. They have a vibrant downtown and a theater group. We went to the Leaksdale home where Anne of Green Gables was written. It doesn't look much like we saw on PBS. We also saw the nearby towns with names of Grafton and Sutton, just like home. Dundurn Castle is in Hamilton. This is a 40-room mansion owned by the McNabb family of Ontario. He was a prime minister in 1840 and lived well beyond his means. When he died, his debts were so exorbitant that they had to sell off his furnishings. Hamilton is also home to the Canadian Air Museum. It is much smaller than the Air and Space Museum at Dulles in D.C., but still very interesting. The estate of Edsel and Eleanor Ford is in Grosse Pointe, Michigan. Just gorgeous. iPods are given to visitors to use while walking the grounds in the outlying buildings such as the lagoon, the pool, and the garage. Absolutely first-class location, estate, and visitor experience. Edsel died of cancer at 43 or so, and Eleanor tried to sell the house. Luckily, the first offer was an insult and she decided to stay. She lived there for more than 30 years after that and raised 4 kids. She decided to create a trust and fund it with $19 million, which has grown enough to maintain the place. This is absolutely a must-see. The children's playhouse was built to scale for the daughter Josephine by her grandmother when she was only 7 years old. It's so tiny and adorable, with a kitchen and sink and bathroom, bedroom, living room, and tea table. Louise would have moved in there as a kid, but Josephine was more interested in outdoor sports. There was a tiny docent working there who doesn't even have to drop her head down in the doorways. She was great too. Grand Rapids is home to the Gerald Ford Presidential Museum. The design seemed very appropriate for Ford, plain and solid, as compared with Reagan's very showy Hollywood-style museum. The Ludington, Michigan ferry dock is where we meet the SS Badger. This boat was built in 1953 by the C&O Railroad to transport train cars across Lake Michigan. In the 1970s, they refitted the ship for passenger comfort and greater appeal to commercial and passenger vehicles. The Badger is the last remaining coal-fired steam engine vessel in North America. The smokestack belches fine black mist, so it's a good thing they have been retired. It was a smooth sail, light rain in the morning, but mostly socked in and overcast. This was the first day without sun on our trip. The boat takes 4.5 hours, but we snagged a great table and a great spot right away. Beginner's luck. We were able to get lots of fresh air and people watch without being in the middle of any crowds. We arrived in Wisconsin to a 1-hour change to Central Standard Time, and it was off to the Maritime Museum in Manitowoc, a AAA gym. We followed Route 10 to Kola, Wisconsin in the Whistling Straits Country Club. The course is a Pete Dye design and very difficult. The PGA tournament will be there next week, so they were setting up all the stands, the tents, and the signs. We looked through the pro shop and then went to see holes 9, 10, and 18, which can be seen from behind the clubhouse. Everyone was walking with caddies, and we watched some pretty good shots and some pretty awful ones. A pretty intimidating place to play. We took a picture at Schofield Avenue and Metro Street in Wausau because Louise grew up on Schofield Avenue in Dudley, which was not anywhere near a Metro Street. We were an hour late for our visit with Auntie Flo at Cousin Judy's house in Minnetonka, Minnesota due to road construction. Auntie Flo looked wonderful and much stronger than we expected. Her hair looked so nice. She had been telling Meme just how disappointed she was that it no longer was curly following chemo. She said that this was the first week that it looked so nice. We sat out on the screened back porch, which is large with overhead fans, very comfortable on a hot day. We started at the Mall of America, an unbelievable destination mall. It has 3 floors of stores with a Nickelodeon-themed amusement park in the center and an aquarium below. The place is almost too much to take in. We walked into the amusement park first, trying to decide if we'd ride something. Are you kidding? This place must have been designed by Dr. Demento. Actually, it's just another experience to remind us how old we've begotten. We could hardly watch some of the action. There was a wild roller coaster that had cars that spun around while going along at breakneck speed. Louise called it Teacups Gone Wild. We took pictures and looked around because you couldn't pay to ride just one ride. It was a minimum of $18.95, and so well organized that you could buy tickets from ATM-style kiosks. The other things we noticed were that most rides said people with neck injuries should not ride. That was good enough for Louise. We scanned the names of the stores. Not too many unique ones that tempted us. We were strictly tourists at this mall. We noticed lots of foreign visitors, and everyone seemed to take pictures outside showing the mall's logo. From there it was off to St. Paul in the historic Fitzgerald Theater, where Garrison Keillor broadcasts the Prairie Home Companion, and then to Mickey's Diner, which is open 24/7. Mulligan stew is their specialty, plus bean soup, chili, and bean sides. We drove 3.5 hours to the famous Conn Palace in Mitchell, South Dakota. There on the 3rd building. The first one burned down and the second one proved to be too small. The building is covered in corn husk halves, which are changed annually because of weather and because the birds eat the corn. While in Mitchell, we drove through town and Louise yelled, "Stop the car!" We had spotted a Brown Shoe Fit Company store, and she couldn't believe her eyes. It was 43 years ago, while working for Boldt Shoe Company, that she first heard of Brown Shoe Fit Company. It's not exactly lyrical, is it? Anyway, we went into the store and spoke with the woman inside and explained that back in those days, invoices were typed one at a time. The accounts receivable clerk who typed an invoice to Brown Shoe Fit accidentally typed Brown Shit Fit Company. She was afraid she'd lose her job when she discovered her error, but it all worked out okay. Louise laughed so hard she couldn't work that day, and even today laughed so hard she could hardly tell the story. The clerk was amused and said she would tell the story at the company gathering next week. She figured it would be well received. Wall drug billboards are hundreds and even thousands of miles away from Wall, South Dakota, informing weary travelers how many miles it is to the famous Wall drug. They are a staple of the Wall drug advertising, drawing thousands of visitors every year to the town. The signs remain hand-painted to this day. We arrived in Badlands National Park to a gorgeous sunset and more grand-scale beauty. We attended a ranger program at night that was supposed to be stargazing, but turned out to be more about the Lakota tribe and their spiritual beliefs with respect to the Badlands and surrounding areas. They considered these areas to be extremely significant spiritually. The stars were also amazing in the black night sky. The next morning we drove through the Badlands Loop. This is the primary way to see the extensive landscape. The colors were completely different than the prior evening and even more dramatic. Only 2% of native prairie remains in the United States, and the Badlands were once a seabed. It is covered in soil that gives the appearance of giant rhino or elephant skin. Instead of dinosaurs, they had sea animals. There are huge mounded hills, then flat areas of grassland and prairie. Buffalo do roam here, and we could see them with our binoculars. We really enjoyed the prairie dog towns, watching them stand up on their haunches and peer around. They are endearing. We got some pictures from the car, but when we tried to get out for a closer look, they ran away as if we were giant monsters. Erosion in the Badlands is 1 inch a year, which is very dramatic. This landscape is constantly changing and will eventually completely erode away. The Crazy Horse Monument will dwarf most major iconic statues, such as the Washington Monument and the Statue of Liberty, when it's complete. Of course, it will take forever to complete. They've been at it now for more than 40 years. Mount Rushmore was next. Our first impression is that the four faces seem smaller than we expected. Part of this is that we have seen so many close-up pictures that the perspective is off. Leading to the mountain is an impressive walkway with the flags of all the states lining both sides. We took the 1-mile walk around the mountain and under the faces. We used their award-winning personal tour recording machines. The program was extensive and very well done. The place is crawling with motorcycles. We decided we needed to go to Deadwood and Sturgis to see what the bikers were really doing. The motorcycles are arriving for the 70th Sturgis Bike Rally. To put it in perspective, the state of South Dakota has a population of 800,000 people. The Sturgis Rally attracts in excess of 500,000 bikes, we were told. Deadwood is famous for their cemetery where Buffalo Bill Cody and Calamity Jane are buried. The cemetery is atop a hill, Boot Hill. The place is well visited and the tour guide gave lots of history and was very informative. We had a complete floor show of bikers. The vast majority are over 50, even 60. Hair is either flowing or else it's close cropped. Lots and lots of head wraps, but only 10% wear helmets. There was leather everywhere and tons of tie-dye. Women had bling on their head wraps and their leathers. Everyone had Sturgis 2010 or previous years in the patches on their leather. While the vast majority of bikes were Harley Davidson, it was fun to see the customized ride and the trikes. The bikers made Deadwood feel very alive, an old wild, wild west. Cowboy up! Deadwood is a National Historic Landmark. From Deadwood we went to Sturgis. It was laid out like a NASCAR event, bigger than Brimfield and even more colorful. Vendors had fabulous trailers and catchy tents. We saw neat old Indian cycles. It was a circus really, which is part of the reason to go there. We left for Wyoming, where the state motto is Forever West. On this part of the trip, we saw coal mines, more black hills, and oil rigs. Devil's Tower is truly gigantic and can be seen for many, many miles as it's quite flat around the tower, which is an old volcanic neck. Up close, it looks like it's made of concrete and color and texture. It was 90 degrees outside, so we decided it was too hot for a trek any closer. The route to Buffalo, Wyoming brought us through some spectacular scenery, as you shall see as you ride along with us. We have reached the end of episode 1 as we arrive in Buffalo, Wyoming, and the sights and sounds of the Wild West.